not doing that. Of course, Jazz Patterson kind of had his breakout game in this last one, the 59-yard run, of which obviously he didn't score, and then they ended that drive with a field goal. And then he punched one in from 4 yards out. 4 yards out later. Kaleb Johnson had a couple good runs. It's a step in the right direction. I want to give them credit where credit's due, but the run game has to improve drastically if that's going to be their approach to games. If they're going to put the gas on in the first quarter and the second quarter and then just gradually wean off and lean on the defense, your run game has to be better so you can run more clock.
I don't want to overreact to Patterson's success. Limited number of carries. Kaleb Johnson has been the guy since the start of last season, but Patterson was having more success, and Kaleb Johnson did struggle in game one as well at just over 3 yards per carry. So based on watching, possibly rewatching, is there something there that maybe Patterson's got something Kaleb Johnson does, whether that's vision or otherwise, or just those running plays worked?
I think it's a combination of the running plays worked. They hammered the counter big time in that game because it was working. Secondarily, one thing that I talked to my cohort Adam Jacoby about during the game is that Jazz Patterson hits the hole. He sees the hole, he hits the hole. Kaleb Johnson, I don't know whether it's he's caught up in his head. I don't know if he has any, and this is just speculation, like a nagging injury or something like that we just don't know about. But Jazz Patterson is see hole, hit hole. And in the Iowa offense, in Brian Ferentz's offense, that's kind of what you got to do. It's really not any more complicated than that. And I feel like Kaleb Johnson is making it a little more complicated than he needs to. He's seen as this big back. He got that Powerade NIL deal, of course, and was one of the best freshman running backs in the country last year and did a lot behind a really bad offensive line. Now, I don't know if he still thinks he has to do it all himself, if he's just thinking about it too much and trying to get shifty behind the offensive line and playing, I don't know, quote unquote, cute football as opposed to making it simple like Jazz Patterson is. But that's why I see it transpiring that way, is that Jazz Patterson has made it simple. It's simple, but not easy. See hole, hit hole. And Jazz Patterson is a downhill runner, and I think that's to his advantage, especially in this game.
Yeah, it was very obvious that he just, there were no cuts, there were nothing, and it just was north and south immediately. And I don't know if that just made him look more explosive just because he was so determined and so decided once he got the handoff that that's where I'm going. But it looked like just a burst every time through the seam for 5, 6.
Yep. And I've been I haven't exactly verbalized it to anybody but myself, but I've been thinking about Kaleb Johnson as such for a little bit now, especially in these last 2 games. And I don't want to hammer on Johnson too much, more so praise for Jazz Patterson. But and we've seen flashes of this from Jazz Patterson throughout his short-lived Iowa career to this point. To see it come to fruition on Saturday was honestly kind of gratifying for folks like myself in the Iowa media who have seen these flashes and said, hey, keep your eye on Jazz Patterson. And now it comes to a head, and he has that 59-yard run and punches it in for his first score of his career.
Because of Jazz Patterson and his, I don't want to overplay it, his emergence. It's not like he ran for 175 yards, but he looked good. And there is a comparison to be made, and Elliot and I were talking about it, between Jazz Patterson, his running style, and whether it's more effective for this offense than what we've gotten out of Kaleb Johnson through 2 games. Did you see a difference there, or just better blocked plays, better executed plays up front that allowed him to gain more yardage?
No, I mean, I think that Elliot's estimation of that is 100% on. And keep in mind that fans are probably tired of hearing me say this because, and I've kind of just been a ventriloquist, if you will, for Don Patterson. He's used the term glider to describe Kaleb Johnson. And, you know, it's one of those things, like we get hyped over certain aspects of athletes. Like we look at a guy like Kaleb Johnson, he's 6'1", 6'2", 225, and it's like, man, this guy's going to be a beast. He's a poor man's Derrick Henry. I mean, I don't know that I jumped on the hype train like that, but I think you see a guy like that and you're thinking, wow, sky's the limit. Some guys don't have it, and I'm not saying he doesn't have it, but I'm also not saying he's Derrick Henry. And I think the way he runs, he's not Derrick Henry. He is a glider. I don't think he hits the holes with authority. I think Jaz runs a lot harder than Kaleb Johnson does. And as far as top-end speed, I'm sure Kaleb has got better top-end speed. He's got a long stride. But the problem is, even with that size at 6'1", 6'2", I mean, how many plays on Saturday, Elliot? I talked after the game against Utah State, hey, the run game looks better because they had less negative plays. Man, I'm sitting there in the stands on Saturday, and I'm watching, -4, -5, -6 on run plays. That's just obscene. When you have a 6'2", 225-pound running back and you're losing 6 yards on a simple handoff, that tells me you're having severe breakdowns up front. Now, I will say Jaz Patterson's style, they had less negative runs with Jaz. Now, he also ran the ball less. I don't know if that'll continue moving forward. I will say this. As much as I like Kaleb Johnson out of high school, and I don't know if I sent you this, Mark. I think I sent it to Coach Patterson. But I cut a video on this channel when I first tried to build this channel 2 years ago. I cut a video about Jaz's commitment, and I went back and just watched kind of what my initial thoughts were to his commitment. I was higher on Jaz Patterson out of high school than I was on Kaleb Johnson, despite Kaleb's speed. Let's not forget Jaz Patterson had offers from like Alabama. I mean, he had huge offers on the table. So he was at one time a 4-star recruit. Deerfield Beach High School had a bunch of coaching. They had weird coaching issues his senior year. It kind of took away from his numbers. He ended up getting dropped by a lot of, I don't know if, well, Elliot might be able to tell us what Rivals has got him at or what they had him at. But a lot of these services have dropped him to a 3-star. But at one time he was a 4-star. And frankly, I remember, and again, you can go back and watch that video when he committed. When I watched him on tape, I'm like, man, this dude looks like Sean Green looked like out of high school. Because Sean Green was not, I wouldn't what Sean Green at Iowa, 215, 220. And at the NFL level, he was probably closer to 225, 230. And, Jaz Patterson was 190 coming out of high school. That's kind of what Sean Green, we go back and look at Sean Green's high school numbers. He was about the same size. Now, I don't know if Jaz can pack on that much weight or if it's good for him to pack on that much weight. They're obviously different backs. But there's something about, and Kirk Ferentz talked about it today during his weekly presser, Jaz has that ability to invite contact and run hard regardless of the situation. He's fearless. And I'm not saying Kaleb Johnson, you hate to, unfortunately, given the fact that they came in the same class, they play the same position, you're going to compare the two. But Jaz just seems to welcome contact, and he hits the hole hard. He's not fearful of collision. He welcomes collision. I think the only guy on that football field on Saturday that was going to stop him on that 59-yard run was TJ Tampa. I mean, what a play by TJ. That dude, I mean, just that one. I went back and watched that. Did you watch that playback, Elliot?
Yeah, I did. Yep.
That was an insane get. TJ Tampa jumps over a teammate and somehow runs Jaz down like it's nothing. Like TJ Tampa, I don't know what he's going to run at the combine, but that dude, based on speed alone, I would think is going to be a pretty significant draft pick when he comes out. So anyways, I like Jaz. The running game looked better. I mean, they ran for 130 yards, I think 121 after you account the one sack. So they went up against a better defense in a tougher place to play, and ran for more yards, averaged more per carry. And it's a step in the right direction. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. But they did run for over 100 yards against a very tricky 3-3-5 Cyclone front.
To address Jaz's recruitment before we get out of that, Rivals had him at 5.73 star, so fringe 4. And he did have offers, like you mentioned, from Alabama, Michigan, let's see here, Oregon, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Utah.
That's a gauntlet of offers. Yeah. I mean, I think people started to kind of forget about him because again, I go back to Kaleb Johnson's size. He's a guy Iowa hasn't had. And let's not forget a couple of years ago when those guys committed, who was the talk of the Big Ten at that position? It was Braylon Allen, converted safety at Wisconsin. And he's this big, again, Derrick Henry-like dude. There's all these Leonard Fournette, these big dudes that were kind of changing how we view that position. And I just think we kind of maybe overlooked him as Kaleb came in and got some time his freshman year. But I just remember Kirk Ferentz last year. I know you weren't covering Iowa last year, Elliot, but Kirk talked about Jazz right there with Kaleb all of last year. And Kaleb maybe was a little bit more physically ready to go. But you also had, 3 backs in front of him. And now, Jazz has shown his willingness to pass block. That clip of him taking out those 2 Iowa State defenders on the blitz, that was an impressive play. But I mean, he was doing that every time he got in there and third down. I mean, he was their third down guy, and I'm just excited about him. And like I said, those offers are notable. I mean, I know some schools throw out offers, but whenever you get, the Michigans, the Penn States, the Alabamas, the Oregons of the world, A&M, Tennessee, that obviously is evidence of, hey, this was a good land. And the kid's got a chip on his shoulder. You probably heard it. You were obviously there, Elliot. He talked after the game on Saturday. He's just a baller. So it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop.
I watched the entire game. I had 2 other games that I was watching at the same time, so I'm splitting my 2 eyeballs into 3 directions. But where do I find this play from TJ Tampa?
Well, just go on the highlights. It's a 59-yard run.
Okay.
The 59-yard run by Jazz Patterson. If you go to just any of the highlights, that's like your biggest highlight for Iowa. And you just watch the guy who ran Jazz Patterson down. And there's a reason why he was wanted by scouts last year, and I'm guessing he's only elevating his stock this year. He's really good.
I'm here to take in the information and the insight from both of you. So that's what I do here. Now, other than that, the only thing we want to reserve time for is Corey's breakdown of the TV rating. He'll go on with that for about 20 minutes, right, Corey?